besieged by 1,000 or more of the Mexicans under Santa Anna. I sustained continual bombardment and cannonade for 24 hours and have not lost a man. The enemy has demanded a surrender at discretion, otherwise the garrison are to be put to the sword. I have answered the demand with a cannon shot. Our flag still waves proudly from the walls, and I shall never surrender nor retreat.
Then I call on you in the name of liberty, of patriotism, and everything due to the American character to come to our aid with all dispatch. The enemy is getting reinforcements daily and will no doubt increase to 3,000 or 4,000 in 4 or 5 days. If this call is neglected, I am determined to sustain myself as long as possible and die like a soldier who never forgets what is due to his own honor and that of his country.
Victory or death, William Barrett Travis.
The citizens of Gonzales did not hesitate. They responded. Those who responded are known as the Immortal 32.
All you folk of Texas, wherever you may be, I'll tell you of some troubles that we had chance to see. Our name is nothing extra, our tale is nothing new. The story of our heroes, Immortal 32. People of Gonzales would form a loyal band. Our old 18 had risen to make their valiant stand. Of those who left their families to join the siege of Bear, some 9 remained with Travis to stop our foe right there. Heard the colonel's clamor for victory or death. No one could hold his banner, no one could keep his breath. And so they set to raging amidst the women's tears. Gonzales raging company of mountain volunteers. San Houston sets us raging deep in the Alamo. They left their wives and families for San Antonio. The day of their arrival, I know was March the 1st. Through shot and shell they traveled Santana's bloody thirst. They took up their positions to reinforce the men. Through charge and charge they held them until they charged again. And when the smoke had settled with no more cannon pour, no man was left a breathing, lined up at heaven's door. Our gallant men had answered, their 41 did fall. Some 9 had come to victory, though all had pledged their all. And now you've heard our story, we tried to tell it true. The story of our heroes, Immortal 32. They were the fallen Rangers, Immortal 32.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning, and thank you for joining us. My name is Ernesto Rodriguez. I am the Senior Curator and Historian of the site. And first of all, our sincere gratitude goes out to the Gonzales Crystal Theaters, the Young Texians, for that stirring performance, which so vividly illustrated the humanity of the sacrifices made by the Gonzales families. In February 1836, the Mexican army descended upon the Alamo. Colonel William Barrett Travis sent out a plea for help. This plea was answered by 32 men from Gonzales, riding through enemy lines to join the woefully undermanned garrison. Today, 32 men from Gonzales answered the call once again to come to our aid. In the name of liberty, of patriotism and everything dear to the American character. We remain grateful for the brave men who entered the Alamo 187 years ago today. With that gratitude comes a somber truth that they never left. Today, you will hear from several people who hold this history dear to their hearts. One such person is Dr. Don Frazier, a remarkable historian and longtime steward of Texas history. Dr. Frazier heads up the Texas Center at Schreiner University. Please welcome Dr. Don Frazier, my friend.
Would you go? Even if you believe the odds were against you, would you go? If every instinct in you said your gesture might end poorly. Well, perhaps defeat wasn't inevitable. Perhaps your fate was not sealed. Perhaps your destiny remained unwritten. Perhaps even though it looked mighty risky, you might find a way out of this fix and in the process do some good. Hope always abides. Would you go? Remember, life, death, honor, and perhaps even the will of God hang upon how you answer. The rebellion in Texas had been boiling for 4 months when, on February 24th, Andrew Ponton, the alcalde of Gonzales, received a dispatch from William Barrett Travis at the Alamo. General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna and his Mexican Centralist Army was heading toward Barrett. The enemy in large force is in sight, it read. We want men and provisions. Send them to us. We have 150 men and are determined to defend the Alamo to the last. Give us assistance. The men of Gonzales knew these men. Had you lived in that town at that time, you would have known someone among that 150. Clearly, what had started as a Federalist rebellion against the brutal central government had taken a turn. The townspeople considered their options. Certainly, the main army of Texas, the men with Colonel James Fannin down at Goliad, would move to the relief of their comrades in Bear. But what if they didn't? What if the Centralists were already at La Bahia as well? None of that mattered much at this point. The call had arrived now in the streets of Gonzales. Your town was the closest cluster of American immigrants to Bear, about 3 days or so away. Your town was the first possible place that could respond to this appeal. There were more than 500 people living in DeWitt's colony, but they were scattered. Gonzales, its 32 buildings and its few dozen families were the only thing even resembling a town in those stretches. Ponton had called out the able-bodied men as well as the men of the Gonzales Mounted Company, a ranger company, and let them know the dark news. It was intelligence hard to ignore. For the next 2 days, hard conversations buzzed through the village as wives and husbands discussed the options and the implications of how they answered that call. Women worried about the future of their families should their husband and father head over the horizon to the west to confront this deadly threat. Worry and dread stalked every cabin for 2 long nights. What food could be spared? Who among them could be spared? If an enemy army was on its way, what would become of their town, their years of labor, their dreams of the future? Should the men stay and defend their own hearths? Should they ride to the Alamo's aid? Then, on February 27th, another messenger galloped into town, his saddlebag holding yet another dispatch from the Alamo. It was addressed to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world. The news was dire. That was you. You were the people of Texas. You were Americans. So were your friends downstream, down the road, and back in the States. So were Colonel Fannon's men at Goliad. It included the men gathered at the town of Washington and in faraway Washington City. It was also Stephen F. Austin, Sam Houston, wherever they were. Certainly this dispatch included hundreds, maybe even thousands of men coming to Texas. At least you hoped there were volunteers on the way. For you, though, the time to decide had come. More than 30 men of Gonzales volunteered to go to Bear. Many were married, but most were single. On average, they were in their late 20s, with the oldest at 42 and the youngest at 15. The majority had only been in Gonzales or Texas for a few years. Many had come from the Ohio Valley, and some had even been born in faraway Pennsylvania and New England. Others came from the South. A number had challenged Santa Anna's government on the banks of the Guadalupe River back in October, which had started all this drama. Some had an inkling of what they were headed toward. After all, a few had been in the street battles of Bear just a couple of months before. Some were the messengers that had ridden out with Travis's dispatches, but were determined to return to the garrison. There was even a group of 3 teenagers, friends, who could not fathom what might lay ahead, but were game for the challenge. One of these boys, James Gladden King, had even insisted on taking his father's place, figuring his mother and siblings would fare better should he meet his maker than if the head of the family fell. There were neighbors, relatives, and brothers by marriage in the mix. These men were taking a calculated risk, a big bet on the future of Texas, their town, and their families. So, with hope that their brave gesture would be mirrored by many, and that hundreds of Texians from all the American colonies were riding hard for Bear, this band of men and boys cinched their saddles, kissed their families farewell, and headed west, full of hope and confidence and dread and apprehension. What if their bet was wrong? What if they miscalculated? Still, they went. They could not have known, nor could they have guessed, that they would pass into history as the Immortal 32. I would like to now call upon those faithful men from Gonzales, the Immortal 32. now my pleasure to introduce the mayor of Gonzales, Texas, Steve Zucker. Welcome, Mayor.
Good morning. My remarks today are dedicated to the late, great Paul Frenzel, a true citizen of Texas, a devoted student of Texas history, and a gifted advocate for the city of Gonzales. In 2019, the Alamo Trust reached out to the city of Gonzales with an invitation to collaborate and present this event to the public. The city was asked to organize a group of 32 men and teen boys to ceremonially recreate the arrival of the Immortal 32 at the Alamo. I would like to add that with us today, we have in the Young Texians Thespians troupe 2 descendants of the Immortal 32, and in the column of marchers there are 7 descendants from various parts of the state. It is difficult to place a value on what the Alamo Trust set loose when it created this event. One outcome occurred 1 year ago here in San Antonio when the incomparable Dr. Amy Jo Baker, with the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, established the Immortal 32 Families and Descendants Association. This past Saturday, the group's annual meeting was held in Gonzales with outstanding attendance, speakers, and presentations. In Gonzales, we have redoubled our efforts in our own commemorative events. The laying of a wreath by the Sons of the Republic of Texas every February 27th, the day the Gonzales Ranging Company of Mounted Volunteers departed for the Alamo. And every March 5th, the presentation of 41 yellow roses, 32 for the Immortal 32, and 9 more roses for the 9 Gonzalians who were already at the Alamo, to commemorate when news of the Alamo was received in Gonzales. We have been inspired to create new texture and nuance in our events. A lone rider at the laying of the wreath ceremony, for example. A new candlelight vigil on March the 11th to commemorate the runaway scrape. The highly disorganized forced march of the colonists after the fall of the Alamo, with the widows and their children departing from Gonzales and picking up hundreds of settlers along their eastward trek toward the safety of the United States. They slogged through rain-soaked roads and made risky crossings at swollen rivers and creeks, taking a path first toward Nacogdoches and then on to the U.S. border and Natchitoches, Louisiana. When the Alamo Trust first put the ceremonial march of the Immortal 32 together, they explained that they were seeking ways to expand the story of the Alamo, to connect it with Goliad, with Gonzales, and with San Jacinto. Their thought was to call attention to the families and individuals who participated in lesser-known events that led up to the 2 big battles, and the decisions and actions made each step of the way. There are many stories for the telling here, stories of real people, men, women, and children, with the full range of human feelings just like you and me, committing themselves to a cause with fervor and intent, and during the runaway scrape, pressing on through their fears and panic to preserve their safety and survival. Because of my duties here at the podium today, this is the first year I have not participated in the march. But having been in the ranks before, I can tell you the impact that many of us have experienced as participants, both as individuals and as a collective group. The sharp rat-a-tat of the marching drum reverberates against your skin and penetrates your senses. Your feet find their rhythm and start sounding out in unison on the pavement. The weight of the moment creeps in. It's not like we are the honor guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier or the Royal Guard at Buckingham Palace, but jaws become set, eyes become fixed straight ahead, and the mood is sober, somber, and reflective. Are we the men we think we are? Are we as committed and dedicated in our daily pursuits to our families, to our colleagues, and to our fellow citizens as we need to be? Are we prepared and ready for what may come? For the opportunity and the collaboration provided by the Alamo Trust, the City of Gonzales' gratitude is beyond profound. In thanks and in appreciation, we are riding eternally toward you. I'm now delighted to call up the president of the Gonzales chapter of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, the magnificent Marge Kassir.
Thank you, Mayor Steve. Mayor Steve is not a native Texan, but he has supported the legacy of Gonzales as the one settlement that sent reinforcements to the Alamo. He's a Gonzalian by adoption. The story of the Immortal 32 is legendary. In answer to Travis's victory or death letter, brave men left Gonzales at 2 o'clock on the afternoon of February 27th. They entered the Alamo at 3 a.m. on March 1st, riding not only through enemy lines, but also through friendly fire, as sentries from the Alamo fired upon them before they knew they were Texians. 5 days later, they all perished. The provisional government, elected during the consultation of 1835, sought to muster volunteer ranging companies into service to supplement the regular army. They were to operate as independent companies, but to be attached to the army as needed. Bird Lockhart certified that he mustered 24 men into the Gonzales Ranging Company of Mounted Volunteers on February 23, 1836. Not all of those men went to the Alamo. On February 24th, Travis's letter appealing for reinforcements arrived. On February 25th, a second letter came. More men joined what was then called the Gonzales Alamo Relief Force when it left Gonzales. The 32 men who rode into the Alamo on March 1st have since come to be called the Immortal 32. Who were these men who risked their lives and rode into the Alamo under cover of darkness? The following information comes from the Alamo website and the Texas State Historical Association online handbook, as well as some oral histories from families. There were those who mustered into the Gonzales Ranging Company of Mounted Volunteers on February 23rd. That was before they knew how desperate the situation at the Alamo was. Captain George C. Kimball was the commander of the Ranging Company. He owned and operated a hat factory in Gonzales with Almiron Dickinson, who was already at the Alamo. Kimball had one child when he left Gonzales, and his wife Prudence was pregnant with their second. Jacob C. Dorst had land on the Guadalupe River above Gonzales. John Davis was a single man in his late teens when he received his quarter league of land on Lavaca Creek. All we know about William Fishbaugh is that he was a resident of Gonzales. Galba Fuquay, another resident of Gonzales, was 3 days shy of his 17th birthday when he died on March 6th. Andrew Kent was a farmer in DeWitt's colony. He and his son David both mustered into the Ranging Company. David stayed with the large family when Andrew left for the Alamo. Isaac Millsaps lived in Gonzales with his blind wife and their 7 children. Marcus L. Sewell was a shoemaker with land in Nacogdoches, but he was in Gonzales when the Ranging Company was mustered. All we know about William E. Summers is that he claimed land in DeWitt's colony. Robert White participated in the Siege of Bear and then commanded one of the Bear garrison's infantry companies. He was at his home in Gonzales when he joined the Ranging Company. After After Travis's letter arrived in Gonzales, the ranging company became known as the Gonzales Alamo Relief Force, and other men joined up. Isaac G. Baker had property in Gonzales and land outside of the town as well. John Kane participated in the siege of Bear, remaining in Bear with an artillery company. He was at his home in Gonzales when he joined the relief force. George Washington Cottle settled on land at the headwaters of the Lavaca River. He participated in the Battle of Gonzales and enlisted in the ranging company on February 24th, the day after the others. He had one daughter, and his wife delivered twins soon after his death at the Alamo. David P. Cummings was a member of the garrison at the Alamo, but left to survey land titled to him on Cibolo Creek. He probably joined the relief force when they were en route to the Alamo. Squire Damon participated in the siege of Bear, remaining in Bear with an artillery company, but he was at home in Gonzales when he joined the relief force. William Dearduff came to Texas with his sister and her husband, James George. He registered for a single man's quarter league of land when he arrived in DeWitt's colony. John Flanders, estranged from his family in Massachusetts, settled in Gonzales and joined the relief force. Dolphin Ward Floyd farmed land outside Gonzales and had a home in the town. He died on his 32nd birthday. He had one child when he left for the Alamo, and another child was born 2 months later. John E. Garvin joined an artillery unit at San Antonio in Bear in December of 1835. He was at home in Gonzales when he enlisted. John E. Gaston lived with his family in Gonzales when he joined up. James George was married to the sister of William Dearduff. They had 5 children. Both men joined the relief force, leaving Elizabeth George to get the family to safety after the fall of the Alamo. Thomas Jackson participated in the Battle of Gonzales and was a lieutenant in the ranging company. John Benjamin Kellogg II, resident of Gonzales, left his wife, Sidney Gaston Miller Kellogg, just days before she delivered their first child in the back of an open wagon on the runaway scrape. William Philip King lived with his family northwest of Gonzales. His father, John Gladden King, mustered into the ranging company on February 23rd. Some records and the monument in Gonzales lists John G. King as having died in the Alamo. In fact, William convinced his father to stay with the family and to let him go to the Alamo in his place. William was only 15 years old, the youngest defender of the Alamo. Thomas Red Miller owned land outside the town, as well as a home, a store, and a hotel in Gonzales. He was a road surveyor and counsel to the municipality of Gonzales. We know only that George Negan was a Gonzales resident. George W. Tomlinson participated in the siege of Bear and re-enlisted in an artillery company. He was at home in Gonzales when the relief force formed. Claiborne Wright was discharged in December 1835 after participating in the siege of Bear. He returned to Gonzales, but he joined up when the relief force was forming. 2 men who had left the Alamo as couriers returned with the Gonzales Alamo Relief Force. Captain Albert Martin brought Travis's letter to Gonzales. He was a resident of Gonzales, operating a general store prior to the Come and Take It event. He participated in the Battle of Gonzales and the Siege of Bear. And he was with Travis at the Alamo when Travis sent him with the letter pleading for reinforcements. Lancelot Smithers took the letter on to the other settlements and to Washington on the Brazos. Martin returned to the Alamo. Charles Despalier was a personal aide of Gonzales Travis. He had left the Alamo as a courier also, and he returned with the men from Gonzales. Jonathan Lindley was a single man who received a quarterly grant of land east of Huntsville. He participated in the siege of Bear and later served in an artillery company and in the Alamo garrison. His name appears on the monument in Gonzales and on lists of the Immortal 32, but there is no documented connection to Gonzales or the Immortal 32 mentioned in his biography on the Alamo website or on the TSHA online handbook. An article in the Gonzales County History states that he went with Captain Albert Martin's men to the Alamo. This tells you a little bit about the men that we know and that they were real people with lives, families, children, brothers, sisters, whatever. We know very little about them. They were sons and brothers. Some of them were husbands and fathers. They were neighbors. We do know that these men gave their lives for a cause in which they believed. Freedom from a tyrannical government. Freedom that they passed on to us. We know that they fought to the end. Santa Anna himself is credited with saying of them and all the men in the Alamo, not one would surrender. Let us now have a moment of silence to honor the fallen men. Please join me now in welcoming our next speaker, Immortal 32 descendant and president of the Immortal 32 Descendants and Family Association, Dr. Amy Jo Baker.
Good morning, Immortal 32 descendants and family members, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a distinct honor and privilege to represent the Immortal 32 Descendants and Family Association on this sacred ground where the blood of heroes was shed to secure freedom and the independence of Texas against a brutal dictator that abolished the rights of Texians. After the return of the Immortal 32 ceremonies concluded, descendants, family members, and others interested are invited to participate in a floral tribute to those brave men and boys by the Immortal 32 monument just in back here at the Convento Plaza, where a roll call will be read and 32 yellow roses will be placed at the foot of the monument. And incidentally, the roll call will be led by Daniel Martinez, who's the chief historian at Pearl Harbor and is a direct descendant of George Kimball, thank you. Additionally, family members are invited to a Dutch treat lunch at the Colonial Room restaurant at the Minger Hotel following that ceremony. I will now read a poem by author and descendant Betsy Wagner. Let me just preface my remarks by saying Betsy Wagner wanted to be here today. She wrote this beautiful poem, but her husband became ill and has been hospitalized and she wasn't able to do it, so I told her I would stand in her stead. The Immortal 32, words from Johnny Kellogg. I'll tell you of my brother's work. It was far from pretty. We came and fought, and yes, we lost, but we don't want your pity. Albert Martin brought the news. It riled us up to hear the desperate plea to come and help, so we gathered up our gear. We all met in Gonzales Square. We mustered one by one. We waited for the briefest time to see who else might come. Let's head on out, George Kimball said. We can't wait any longer. I led my mount to join the rest. Their hooves began to thunder. We traveled hard the first 2 days. We pushed to our fullest extent. The more ambitious riders were Flanders and Andrew Kent. Day 3, Squire Damon said to Floyd that caution now was needed. The idea grew with Cane and White, the notion widely heeded. Day 4, we rode a wider path. John Garvin stalked for scouts. Tom Miller warned, they'll trap our camp. For that we had no doubts. And finally, on the 29th, We waited in the woods. Jacob Darst reminded us to stay as quiet as we could. Young Philip King was stealthy. He slipped up to the pen. He got the guard's attention and said, "Hey, let us in." At last the gates were opened. We were crafty and so bold. We dodged the scouts from Mexico and the early morning cold. There we found the Texans' force, just as we expected, defiant, bold, and vigilant in the bastions they perfected. We saw their worried faces reflected in the lamps. They grabbed our gear and slapped our backs and welcomed us to camp. The sight of it appalled us, worse than what we had expected. There were women and children, and Bowie was sick in bed. It came to our attention within hours it was clear that Texas was in danger of losing everything so dear. James George looked at Deirdre to give him inspiration. Concern shot through the group of us as we questioned our migration. Isaac Baker went into action with Fisbaugh on his left. They took a post atop the wall to give the others rest. By sunup, shouting started. From the distant guns it came. We didn't see those rifles yet, but they were deadly just the same. And from the town we heard the band. They played the Col de Guayo. The bugles sang their promise to send us to their inferno. In spite of our resistance, many took a hit. The women dressed the bloody wounds from a meager doctor's kit. The cruel aggression wouldn't stop, the chaos unrelenting. We thought we had discovered hell, but what good was lamenting? They gradually encircled us with guns and knives and ladders. Their cannons broke the mission walls. Our defenses didn't matter. So we cloistered in the barracks. Some bolted the big doors. We ran to the supply carts and waited between the stores. My heart was pounding in my brain. I found it hard to breathe. My chest was tight and I noticed a strange chatter to my teeth. Soon they blew the bolted doors, continued to pursue us. From room to room their masses came, their blades were passing through us. Then I saw the Fuqua boy. His young face was shattered. His jaw was hit. He tried to speak. He spit his blood and blathered. John Davis tried to help his friend. A bullet stopped his kindness. Millsap took one in the face, inflicting him with blindness. The time went by with screams and shouts, with punishing confusion. The camp became a murder scene, Santa Anna's retribution. I saw the bodies on the ground, Nagin, Wright, and Jackson, as Lindsay, Summers, and Cottle kept up their valiant action. George Tumlinson was going strong. I thought he might survive, but then, alas, a musket blew and he fell by my side. A Salado grabbed me by the hair. I had no more time. I shoved my knife between his ribs and traded his life for mine. It went on this way for hours, men being sliced and shot, till one by one we all were lost, but the Mexicans were not. The ground was like a butcher shop. Salados built a fire. Their captain said to pick us up and throw us on the pyre. So that's the way it ended. For us the war was over. Our time was short, our mission lost, the dread of being a soldier. That was the end of the Alamo, but certainly not for Texas. Sam Houston led another band. Vengeance is infectious. Did we buy time for Texas? It's darn sure it wasn't free. The time we gave old Sam was bought by my brothers and by me. My name was Johnny Kellogg. That was no one left to tell it, except Almiron's dear wife, whose courage earned her merit. So if you knew old Jess McCoy, Espalier, or Cummins, or if you knew John Gassard or any of the others, you know that they were precious to their mothers, wives, and children. Remember us in Texas. We're looking down from heaven. Our last speaker, I'm delighted to invite Peyton Moore, a young resident of Gonzales who can speak to what it was like to grow up in a town with a legacy of bravery and sacrifice.
Hello. I was asked to come up here today to speak to you what it was like to grow up in a town such as Gonzales. Gonzales is a town full of such rich history, and I was introduced to this at the ripe old age of 5 years old when we went to go visit our town's local history museum. That very same day I learned that my great-grandmother, Elizabeth Fink, known to friends and family as Polly, was a member of the Daughter of the Republic of Texas, and ever since then I would go over to her house and bother her to tell me stories about Gonzales and why the Texas independence was so needed and just taught to us so vigorously. And during one of those stories, she told me that I was a descendant of George W.B. Davis and Philip King, one of the Immortal 32 and the youngest defender of the Alamo. When I found this fact out, it baffled me that I could be related to such a courageous young man. Ever since then, I've been inspired to learn more about my town's history. Now, if you ask me what it's like to walk through Gonzales, I would have to tell you it's educational. There's almost no place in the town that doesn't have a plaque dedicated to it or some unique story behind it. Nowhere is that truer than in Town Square. Everywhere you look, there are some old antique shops or monuments to the fallen. It's truly a remarkable place, but it's not just Town Square. Places like the J.B. Wells House, Pioneer Village, and the Eggleston House offer historical experiences like no other. One of my favorite places that not many may know about is the underground Confederate fort of Fort Wall, which is right next to Pioneer Village. Gonzales isn't just known for the places in town, but also for what happened there. It was the location of the first battle of Texas independence from Mexico. Some also know it as the Lexington of Texas, and every October 2nd, we commemorate it with a reenactment and the Come and Take It festival. If I had to sum up what I feel about growing up in Gonzales, I have to say I feel honored to be in a town full of such rich history and to be related to such great men who gave their lives in sacrifice for Texas. Now, we will witness the arrival of the long-awaited help, the wary soldiers who had no idea this would be the only brave group to answer the call for help. Gonzales men, march on and meet your compatriots.
Company, and shut, shoulder, arm. To the Alamo, raise hands, arm. Shoulder, arm. Gentlemen, Dennis Gonzales. Prepare to enter the Alamo, join your new comrades in arms. First, hats off, 3 cheers, the Alamo, to Gonzales. Hip hip, hurrah! Hip hip, hurrah! Hip hip, hurrah! Gonzales, call out to join your comrades.
Arrival is a blessing. You're the ones that have answered our call for aid. Cheers for the men from Gonzales! Hooray! Hurrah! Hurrah! So glad to see you, boys.
Once again, Gonzales answered the call for aid, forever being recorded as brave soldiers who put sacrifice before self. Thank you very much for attending our Immortal 32 ceremony. You are welcome to come up and greet the Immortal 32 and take photos. Immediately following this event, there will be a ceremony and brief program at the Immortal 32 Monument in Convento Courtyard, with the reading of the names and laying of flowers. Thank you for being here as we honor the brave 32 men from Gonzales, and always remember the Alamo.
Those who'd like to join us for the laying of the flowers, we're going to the convento.
Got him all dolled up, so you may not. Did you recognize him? Okay, good.
Did you see Devin?